in West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. And he said in his speech that decriminalization wouldn't work. And yet, here in this interim period, we have a government who ran on a clear promise to legalize marijuana. They've introduced legislation to legalize marijuana, and yet we are still arresting and giving criminal charges to Canadians across this country, thousands of Canadians, who will now have criminal charges, criminal records for the rest of their life, based on something that this government says is good. It's fine. You know, marijuana should be legal. And so I'm just wondering if he could comment on their complete lack of doing anything about this problem. We're taking up valuable court time, taking up police time. We have criminals that are going free because they're not getting trials in enough time. We should decriminalize it in the interim so that these people aren't saddled with criminal records for the rest of their lives. They can get jobs, they can cross the border, because now we say marijuana is fine, we should legalize it. So I just wonder if you could comment on that situation.
The honourable member for St. Catharines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives say we're moving too fast on this legislation. The NDP say we're moving too slow, so we must be doing it the appropriate speed, Mr. Speaker. This was a campaign commitment that we made to Canadians, Mr. Speaker, and quite plainly we are fulfilling that campaign commitment. It is currently an illegal activity. We are working hard to fix that, and as the Parliamentary Secretary mentioned earlier, the law is the law is the law, and Canadians are expected to follow that. We're looking to change that, and we're on pace to meet our campaign commitment by July of 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I listened to my colleague's speech. My question for him, given the fact that this bill is at report stage, means that this bill was before the committee. It would have had a number of experts that testified at that committee and made recommendations. Does the member have a single quote that he can provide me of any medical experts that testified at committee that suggests that it's a good idea for anybody under the age of 25 to use marijuana?
Well, member for St. Catharines.
I'll do one better, Mr. Speaker. My wife is a pediatrician, so I do hear it at home, and the honourable member is correct that individuals who are under the age of 25 should not be using cannabis. But prohibition hasn't worked. The Conservative Party said, you know, we've tried nothing and that hasn't worked, so there's no other plan available for Canadians. Let's use an approach that has worked on something, for example, like tobacco. It is legalized, it is regulated, it is taxed, and we can use that revenue to pursue public education. And after decades, we have had significant success in Canada that teen usage of tobacco is at all-time lows. And this is something that can be done. The honourable member is right. This isn't a harmless substance, and we do want to keep it out of the hands of our kids. But the only way to approach this is through legalization, because prohibition has completely failed. Thank you.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy to speak today on Bill C-45, the legislation that legalizes marijuana in Canada. And I'll say off the top that I support the legalization of marijuana, and I'll be supporting this bill in general, but I have some concerns about the process it maps out for regulating the marijuana industry across this country. And I spoke to this bill on second reading, but I wanted to say more now that it has passed through committee, now that I've heard from more constituents about it, and now that we know more in detail about the government's intentions regarding marijuana legalization. Now, first, in the interest of full disclosure, I'll say that I represent the beautiful riding of South Okanagan, West Kootenay, and it's public knowledge, or at least widely recognized, that the production of marijuana has been an important part of the local economy of my region for many years. And I don't have any precise figures on its economic impact, obviously, since it's a black market. Certainly it's used widely, as I can attest from after door knocking throughout my riding. And I think that it is because the government recognizes this widespread black market, that it recognizes marijuana as used by many Canadians for both medical and recreational purposes, that they have brought forward this bill to regulate marijuana so that it is used safely as possible and that the economic activity it generates can be properly taxed. Now, we in the NDP support the legalization of marijuana with some caveats. And first, we are concerned, as I think we all are here.
I just want to interrupt the honourable member. There are members in the room, in the chamber, who are competing with the honourable member who is speaking. I just would like to hear the honourable member. I'm sure you have something all interesting to say, but I'm trying to listen to the honourable member from South Okanagan, West Kootenay. I'll let him continue.
Mr. Speaker, it was a bit distracting. So first, we are concerned, I think everyone here is, about the use of marijuana by children and young people, and we recognize that there must be no advertising of these products to them. And we're happy to see that Bill C-45 recognizes these concerns as well. Second, there must be a taxation strategy that produces a long-term revenue stream for programs that promote public health, education, and research. One of the big problems of the criminalization of marijuana is that it has made research into its effects, particularly its long-term effects, very difficult. And hopefully legalization in this country will stimulate serious research into this critical issue, and hopefully there will be sufficient funds provided by the government to ensure that this research can take place. And thirdly, there must be legislation in effect to deal with drivers impaired by marijuana. And this is covered under Bill C-46, which has already passed through this House, and I made my concerns about that bill during debate earlier. Suffice to say that I was disappointed with the government's faith in roadside saliva testing, which will not relate to impairment at all, and so will undoubtedly result in charges laid against people who are not impaired. And I hear that there are already groups lining up to challenge that bill in court. But our main concern with the marijuana legislation route that the government has taken is that it has not considered immediate interim decriminalization of simple possession of marijuana, or at least discretion on the part of prosecutors and police not to enforce an unjust law. Here we have a government that was elected on a clear promise to legalize marijuana, and yet 2 years later, courts across the country are still giving people criminal records for simple possession. So on the one hand, the government is saying that using marijuana is okay, and on the other, it's ruining people's lives, often young people, visible minorities, racialized Canadians, by giving them criminal records for using marijuana. It doesn't make sense. It's really a cruel injustice. And it's clogging our courtrooms for no good reason. We are seeing more and more real criminals go free because they can't get a trial in reasonable time frames. We should be looking for ways to clear up the courtroom logjam, and stopping the prosecution of simple possession charges would be an obvious place to start. And we should also be pardoning Canadians who have a criminal record based only on past convictions for simple possession of small amounts of marijuana. These people have a very hard time finding work because of their criminal records. They can't cross borders, yet we're now saying that what they did was not criminal at all. In fact, it will be completely legal. Let's pardon them so they can get on with their lives. Mr. Speaker, I want to change gears here a bit and talk about some of the lessons that we might have learned from alcohol prohibition. Marijuana became illegal in Canada back in 1923, about the same time that alcohol was illegal. Alcohol prohibition was rather short-lived and was legal again in most provinces by 1930. But early regulations made consumption of alcohol not much fun. When I was growing up in British Columbia, there were separate entrances for men and women in beer parlors. You had to be sitting when you drank. You couldn't listen to music, and you certainly couldn't dance. But things have changed, and I think most people would agree that the earlier restrictions seem rather silly now and certainly weren't effective in terms of curbing public intoxication. Beer was once produced only by large monolithic brewing companies, but now we have hundreds of small craft breweries springing up across the country. They not only produce good beer, but they provide good jobs and diversify the economy of many small towns. And in my riding, we also make the best wine in Canada. There are hundreds of small wineries in BC and Ontario, and a growing number in other provinces. The wine industry is a huge part of the economy in my riding, not only through the sales of wine, but also by boosting the tourism industry that is so important in the Okanagan Valley. And I think that what most people like about small estate wineries and small craft breweries is that they are small. They produce diverse products. You can go and meet the people who make the wine and beer. A lot of it is made from organic products, and many advertise the small ecological footprint of their operations have. A lot of my constituents say that they feel that Bill C-45 will be like Prohibition 2.0. This is not what they voted for when they voted for marijuana legalization. They don't want to buy marijuana from huge companies that produce huge quantities of product in indoor facilities that use a lot of power and pesticides to keep production levels up. I recently met with a group of farmers and business people in my riding who want to grow marijuana on a smaller scale. They would like to grow outside using sunlight instead of indoor grow lamps and heaters. They want to grow outside so they can go organic. They won't have to use the chemicals needed to keep indoor plants free from fungus. They would like to grow cooperatively, each farming maybe a hectare of highly secure land, then processing the crop at a central location for distribution. Sounds great. Sounds like the 21st century. It's allowed just across the border in neighboring Washington state, but all of this would be illegal under Bill C-45. In committee, the NDP moved 38 amendments to improve this bill, and one amendment would have given the provinces the option to create their own licensing frameworks, such as those to allow for craft growers and small producers. The government side voted every one of these amendments down. So, Mr. Speaker, I agree that we need to legalize marijuana. We need to get the industry out in the open, away from gangs and organized crime. We need to tax it so that we can fund the education, research, and health programs that are necessary to deal with drug use and addiction that are already so prevalent in this country. But restricting the production of marijuana so tightly by making producers grow indoors, by banning cooperative ventures, we will be incentivizing an ongoing black market that will defeat the original purpose of this bill. So let's learn from alcohol prohibition. Let's not go back to 1930 for legalizing marijuana. Let's regulate it in a modern and intelligent way so that those Canadians who wish to use cannabis can do so in a practical, safe, and healthy manner. Thank you.